Greetings, North Central Washington. Welcome to another episode of Networked, your connection to the forefront of technology, innovation, and education in our region. While our regular beloved rockstar host Jenny is out of town this week, I'm stepping in to keep her seat warm. I'm David Mabey, the Marketing Director of the NCW Tech Alliance, and I'm thrilled to navigate today's exploration of our digital landscape. In this riveting installment, we're privileged to introduce a guest who is reinventing the agricultural sector with a cutting-edge technology. Today we welcome Steve Mantle, the mastermind behind Innovate Ag, a Walla Walla-based ag tech startup. Working in partnership with Microsoft, Steve is ushering in a new era of smart technology-driven farming. During his remarkable 12-year stint at Microsoft, Steve's leadership helped transform Azure Cloud from a $100 million project to an astonishing $10 billion per year success story. In 2018, he shifted gears, trading the bustling tech corridors of Seattle for the tranquil expanses of Walla Walla to nurture both his family and his burgeoning startup. On today's show, we'll dive into Steve's journey from the towering tech citadels of Microsoft to the fertile fields of Walla Walla, where Innovate Ag is sprouting new possibilities. We'll discuss his vision, upcoming ventures, and how he's seamlessly merging technology and agriculture to revolutionize farming in our region. But that's not all. Steve will also share exciting plans for his $50,000 relocation prize from the Flywheel Conference. This significant award will fuel the expansion of Innovate Ag, creating a new hub of innovation right here in Wenatchee and reinforcing our region's standing as an emerging tech powerhouse. So buckle up for an intriguing conversation with Steve about the future of ag tech, his expansion plans, and much more. You're tuned in to Networked, bringing the pioneers of the technology world to your screens, right here on the NCW Life channel. I might not be Jenny, but I promise we have an exciting show ahead. We'll be right back. All right, well, welcome back. I'm excited to introduce Steve Mantle, the CEO and founder of Innovate Ag. Good morning, Steve. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing just great. Thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background and your professional background.
Sure. Well, background, I guess, so start broader. I actually was born and raised till I was age 10 in Australia.
Oh, wow.
And raised by a couple of biologists down there that really showed me how important it is to conserve resources. Australia, there's not a whole lot of water. There's a hell of a lot of land. And so that's kind of rolled with me. We moved when I was the ripe old age of 10 years old to Eastern Washington, to lovely Clarkston, Washington.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, have you been?
No, I have not.
Oh, you got to go to Clarkston.
Well, I grew up in Cleveland, so I know small towns.
Okay, yeah, it starts with a C too. Yeah. So Clarkston, then we moved all over, another C, Cheney and Edwall, and all sorts of places all over Eastern Spangle. Went to high school in Spangle area, and then ultimately, as many kids do, said, I want to go. I went off to college in Michigan for a couple of years and then went off to the big city. Where's the big city? Seattle.
Seattle.
Right?
And is that how you ended up at Microsoft after college?
It is. Well, I stumbled my way through there. I did a couple of years of undergrad, ran out of money along the way because it was self-funding, and so really bumped my way through night school while I was working full-time in Seattle area. Worked in the travel industry for a while. What attracted me about that was you had free flights. You could go to Australia for $50 each way.
Nice.
$50 each way to Australia.
So
it was
how
amazing.
Often were you going?
A couple times a year, baby. Let's go. Yeah. So did that, but ultimately realized, getting paid $1,300 a month in the travel industry, you can't even really pay. You can get a place for next to nothing,
right? But
then you can't actually buy anything. Like you can't exist. So I said, all right, I probably need to finish college. I got into IT, worked for a network equipment manufacturer for a number of years, initially as a systems engineer or sales engineer, it was called, on designing computer networks for college campuses, for schools across the United States, even went to U.S. Air Force bases, which was really fun, overseas, over in Japan. rolled out fiber to the home scenarios, which is fun stuff then. And then that really was at that point, I jumped in at University of Washington to start on my MBA. Sorry out there, Cougs. I'm a fan too, but go Huskies, right?
You got to be a little bit torn because you grew up on this side of the state.
Exactly.
There's that whole stigma with the Huskies and the Cougars.
It's true. That is true. But I will say, you talk to most Huskies, and I'm going to get myself in trouble here, they don't know farming. Mostly. There's some exceptions out there. I know there are. I see some farmers there that know some good farmers that are Huskies as well. Anyway, jumped in on my MBA at UW. At the same time, started at Microsoft. And at the same time, my poor wife, we had our second daughter at the same time, and so it was good times. Started working in business strategy at Microsoft, and then over 12 years held 3 or 4 different roles. Ended up on mergers and acquisition strategy at Microsoft, figuring out how do we grow the cloud, and that's a bit of the background.
Yeah, so that turned into the 12 years of Microsoft, the Azure cloud, growing from $100 million project, right, to a $10 billion annual business.
Yeah, it was kind of force multiplier, and a lot of that, as for many of us in life, it was right place, right time. But these days, your cloud is really, it's Amazon and Google. I mean, we're in the thick of it here, right? With, hydroelectric and all these data centers right in our backyard.
Right.
And so at the time, I think Microsoft had maybe 2 data centers. But Quincy, I believe, was one of the first for Microsoft.
Yeah, now there's, between Wenatchee and Quincy, I don't know how many data centers are going in. There's more coming in.
And globally, and the fiber, and I mean, I was talking to an electrician in one of the hotels the other day and said, yeah, it looks like I've got about guaranteed 10 years of work for the data centers. I'm just blown away. Anyway, the key was in these basically the fight to grow who has the most market share when it comes to public cloud infrastructure. One of the ways Microsoft had to do that was through acquisitions of new technologies. And so my role was to help on scouting, validating, and then bringing on board new technologies in Internet of Things, AI, or it was called Advanced Analytics before we called it AI, open source languages like Python and R. What else did we get into there? Cybersecurity was huge. We bought a few Israeli firms for cybersecurity. So it was really, how do we help build this foundation in the business that can really enable it to be the force multiplier that it is today?
I got you. Okay, so how do you go from all this internet and Seattle, all this exciting stuff, back in 2018 you moved to Walla Walla, and is that when you start Innovate Ag?
It was not. So our oldest daughter at the time was just about to enter high school, and we said, look, if we're going to move back to Eastern Washington, and this is as many parents will see this, and even kids, often you want to kind of run away from what you grew up in, and then eventually you're like, that was a good thing, right? Yeah. And we really saw that. We loved Seattle area, lived there for 20 some odd years. But ultimately, with the hustle and the bustle and some of the homelessness and some of the challenges that are facing there, and worked hard to be part of the solution, but eventually it's like, I want to go back to the goodness. And so we went back to Eastern Washington. I commuted back and forth for Microsoft from Walla Walla for about a year. As any big company has, there was a big reorg. I put my hand up and said, pick me, pick me. At the same time, my boss and boss's boss and my team was all laid off. It was a bit challenging at the time. But I'd already stuck my toe into ag and back to kind of the biologist grandfather and grandmother in Australia saying, be part of the change. Like, how can you help make a difference? My grandfather told me for many years, World War III will probably be over access to fresh water. Right. And it's probably not wrong on that. And so, started in Walla Walla, sat down at a round table with a number of different farmers, row crops, permanent crops, and said, hey, what are the challenges that are facing you? How could data actually help you?
And this is while you're working at Microsoft?
That was while I was at Microsoft. And then reorg happened, and I said, okay, sink or swim, Mantle. Let's go do this. And so took the kids on a couple of national park trips that summer. And is this going to be a hobby, tinkering around in microclimates and that type of thing in orchards out at First Fruits? Back at the time, it was Broachy Orchards. And it's evolved from there.
Cool. So you're making waves in the innovative ag culture as you get going with that. Tell me a little bit about kind of maybe some of the struggles that got going there. And we got a few minutes here before we get to the commercial.
Yeah.
But maybe some of the things that made you decide, hey, I'm going to actually do this. And then did you have any moments where you're like, why did I leave Microsoft, or any? Because you're kind of partnered with Microsoft now too as well.
We
right?
are.
Oh, so-
Yes. Yeah. So we're a Microsoft partner. So, this sounds a bit silly, but one of the biggest things, I've had this entrepreneurial itch just for years, and would do little businesses on the side here and there. But what always kept me rooted to a traditional employer was health insurance. And I think today,
especially with kids, right?
Especially with kids, right? Yeah, and I think a lot of everyone can relate to that. I think we pay $23,000 a year for health insurance, just for my family at this point, behind the scenes. And so that was a big thing. Ultimately, from there, it was, look, sink or swim. Am I going to do this or not? And talking to growers and embracing really their earnestness around the challenges that they're facing and the tenacity and the community. And frankly, we all depend on agriculture. That was the, why aren't I doing this?
Right.
And the fact not just sitting behind a desk and actually being able to stay mostly in the Pacific Northwest as opposed to being on an airplane to far-flung places like Israel and Singapore and China and Japan to go buy these things. I wanted to be a little closer to home with family and community as well.
Okay. Well, we're going to dive more into this and talk kind of about your technology and what that means being out in the field, because I know that's pretty cool back there. So we'll head to a quick break. We'll come back with Steve, and we'll talk more here in a minute. All right, before the break, we learned a little bit more about Steve's background and Innovate Ag. We've kind of touched on that, but really, what does Innovate Ag do?
Well, really, we do ATV rides. Would you like to join us out someday?
Yeah, I love ATVs.
Yeah, right. So we have a fleet. One of the things is ultimately we collect data. And the data is about collecting that data, pulling into a data warehouse so that it can be analyzed by our data scientist team, and then provided in a way that can inform how a grower is more competitive and can unlock more potential from their fields. And we do that in collaboration with partners, horticulturists, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so is that tied in? Is that all the data going through Microsoft then? Is that the tie-in with Microsoft, or?
Yeah, so the data that first on the data collection, to your point on, or to the tie-on on ATVs, we started collecting quite a bit of data from sensors that are out in different partner growers' fields, ranging from soil moisture sensors to weather stations to microtentiometers that are measuring the stress of trees and so on. And then we supplement that by historically having Honda side-by-sides go up and down rows of orchards at 20 miles an hour, assuming no one's around, because safety is important. And so doing that, it is collecting, it's like paparazzi for apples. And these things feel like rock stars, right? After they get, so it's got a strobe that's taking flashes and taking pictures of the apples on each tree at these 20-mile-an-hour speeds. Then we're using a technology called LiDAR that's basically shooting out light to quantify the size of each and every tree.
Fascinating.
And then at the same time, we're mapping what's happening below ground in the soil for nitrogen, for basically all of your nutrients and organic matter, pH, texture, and elevation change. Bring all that together in collecting that data, suck that into our cloud, and then have a team that does data analytics on it. And then all great, fun, and amazing, but have to turn that around in a way that is relatable to a grower.
Right, that's what I was going to say. So
or to a machine.
The grower sees this awesome machine flying down 20 miles an hour.
Right.
But what does it really mean to the grower, and how does it help the grower?
Yeah.
How do they get the data?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I imagine if you gave me a report of all this stuff you just talked about, I'd be like, okay, sweet, what's next?
Right. Well, realistically, what we found in many cases is the grower would look at it and say, okay, oh, wait, we've got COVID going on here, and oh, some people didn't show up here, and oh, there's wildfires going on over here, and I'll get back to that. And eventually it just ends up under a stack of things, and they don't have time to take action on all of it.
Right.
So there's really two things that we do. We have one, it's about yield forecasting. And so that's for your CFOs, your sales desk, et cetera, with these different apple companies, blueberry companies, hops companies, and so on. Weeks, months out, what's your forecast look like? So that as you've got your processing, your trucks, your boxes that you need to order, and so on and so forth, you have an idea, a very accurate idea as to what your yield projection is going to be. The other audience is really more your farm managers. What can they do agronomically this year, next year, the year after,
to meet the yield,
to unlock more potential and even exceed projections, so that they can get that bonus and be happy and sleep a little better at night.
Perfect. So I know all that. So with the different varieties and all those things going on, I imagine this is probably super helpful to a farmer. So does any of this play into? I think I heard you talking about flywheel. You were saying you could see this drove by a tree and it wasn't pruned right or something, and all that was caught because of the sensors on it. Mm-hmm. And then the farmer knew to go trim that tree a little bit more on a certain slope or something like that, which would increase the yield. I think it was in a lot. Mm-hmm. Pardon me, I don't know the orchard industry all that well, but. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I want to say caution in terms of we don't know everything, right? And it would be crazy for us to say, hey, based on what we're seeing from this data, we know better than you, and this is what your guy should go do. Man, bottom line is, it's about ground truthing, and we talk to so many ranch managers, area managers for farms, owners, and it's at a really interesting stage in that many of these, mostly guys, are in their 60s, 70s, even 80s.
Probably generational farmers too. So.
Exactly. And so they've been working on these farms for 30, 40, 50 years, and they've got talk about cloud computing, like they've got so much in their head where they just know, it's instinct, right? And the catch is they're retiring and want to hand the reins off to the next generation. That generation often doesn't have the context that dad did, right? And so
maybe not the patience anymore either.
Or patience, right? And frankly, even labor to get out to all these places. And so the sweet spot for us typically is growers that have 500 acres or more. We work with a number of growers that have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 plus acres as well. The more acreage you have, the more real estate that they're trying to cover, and the data becomes even more and more useful because you can't be all places and all time, and you need to have data-informed decisions. And so it's about, I think, informing decisions. It's not about replacing knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense. So you won the Flywheel Relocation $50,000 award.
Yeah.
So you're coming to Wenatchee, setting up an office or something?
Yes.
So what does that entail? What does that look like for Innovate Ag? And are you working with any local growers with all this new equipment? What are you bringing to the Wenatchee Valley itself?
Well, I mean, we loved winning. We got a twofer from you guys as part of the award. We got audience favorite last year, which was fun, and we were really honored. Thank you, audience. and then we also had this relocation award, and the relocation award enabled us to open up a presence down on the Ave. We're at Mercantile Co-working, and as well as we've got a warehouse out in Quincy. It makes things a heck of a lot easier for us in terms of having more equipment based out of here. I will say, outside of the side-by-sides, initially, increasingly, we are tying into robotics and automation. And so the data that we're providing to growers typically is maps, answering your earlier question, so that they can look at it and say, oh, all right, this is where I've got yield pressure or disease pressures and
Does
so
it have
on
like
at a
some sort of
glance.
color code? Where
That's
you can,
right.
Oh, perfect.
Nice and simple.
Make it.
And then also we're leaning in really hard on feeding that data electronically in terms of precision task maps into sprayers, into fertilizer spreaders, into self-driving tractors. And we're working with a number of growers out in the region, including McDougall, Stamilt, Columbia Fruit, are three key examples where we're excited to work with them on landing data, not just with the growers to make decisions, but ultimately into some of the investments that they're making in the robotic space.
That's really cool. So you actually have a big hand, and I know those are three of the major players around town. Like I said, I don't know much about the orchard industry, but I know those names. So,
Right.
and I know they have a ton of things here. So this has been amazing. Thank you for your time today. What I want to know is if the audience wants to find out more about Innovate Ag or get in touch with you, what's kind of your call to action, or what do you want people to know, or how can they find out more information about you?
Sure. Well, first, save the date on your calendar. So August 2nd of 2023, we have our annual field day that we run with Washington State University and the Washington Tree Fruit Research Commission. It's out at Grandview, so I know it's a little bit out of the region, but last year I think we had about 150 or so growers. This year we're going to bring in more and more of the robotics, automation. I know out of the region here we had Chamberlain Ag came in as part of it as well. And we're going to be showing how we took flower count data and density distribution, blossom distribution in this block, Honeycrisp block, and ultimately created 3 zones and sprayed differently using a variable rate prescription sprayer so that they could use less labor ultimately to get the right crop load. So August 2, come on out to Grandview, look at our website. It's www.innovate.ag or ag.
And Innovate
register
is
for
an
it.
8.
It is, although we spell it both ways because I got tired of actually trying to
Oh,
say,
okay.
you
So
know,
either one will redirect you there.
yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Steve for joining me today. You know, that was awesome. Great to hear. I've seen the 4-wheeler videos and it makes a lot of sense now in my mind. So if anybody's interested in learning more about our nonprofit, the NCW Tech Alliance, be sure to check out our website, ncwtech.org. And, you know, tune in next week. We'll have another guest. And thank you again for joining. Hope you have a great day.